Call it UConn Madness. Next. Welcome to the Stan Simpson Show, a program about Connecticut people and compelling issues. Make it a point to drop in every week. They're back. The UConn men's and women's basketball teams are in the NCAA Final Four again. Both teams are loaded with freshmen. Each have one superstar. There is a legitimate chance for State U to come home with 2 national championships. Scott Gray from WTIC-AM and Rich Coppola from Fox Connecticut join us for a chat about this big UConn weekend. In our second segment, it's the return of our relationship guru, provocative pastor T.C. Brantley. Talks about the pitfalls of dating after divorce and what to watch out for. Then we'll wrap things up with tax attorney Anthony Parent with his tips on how to maximize your deductions and negotiate with the government over back taxes. But first, call it UConn Madness. Here with 2 guys who've got about 50 Connecticut sportscasters a year between, but 6 apiece, about 12. Rich Coppola, Scott Gray. We air Saturday. We're online Thursday. Everyone's gearing up for this. Is it unfair to say that the winner of the UConn men's game with Kentucky, that whoever wins that wins the national championship? Is that too easy and unfair?
Well, I think if you look around the country, I think a lot of people are going to be pulling for VCU should they win their game. I think they've stolen the attention of the spotlight. Jay Billis is probably not too happy after he killed them on Selection Sunday. They've done a tremendous job. But, you would think, certainly, that they would have an advantage, be it Kentucky or UConn. But the way this whole thing has gone, and I think as everyone would say, something that Coach Calhoun said many times yesterday, there is no great team in the country. Not a great team. Many very good teams. Kentucky and UConn would certainly fill that void or fill that role, but certainly not a great team. So.
And don't forget, right, UConn lost to George Mason not so long ago to go to the Final Four. So,
well, the big thing I think that you have to look out for on Monday night, whichever team wins the UConn-Kentucky game, you know that the other team is going to be the sentimental favorite. There are going to be a lot of people in that building on Monday night who are going to be just waiting for VCU or Butler, whoever it turns out to be, to do something.
To beat Goliath.
Right. You always have a situation where you have a heavily favored team of letting the underdog hang around too much. And if you allow that to happen next Monday night, that underdog is going to have an awful loud crowd behind it in that building, which is going to make it difficult.
Now, here's a storyline that will be advanced as we get closer and closer to the big game. Jim Calhoun, his future, 68 years old. He's back again in the Final Four. He gave every indication after they lost to George Mason that had they gotten to that Final Four that he'd call it quits. Do you think he hangs it up either way now?
I don't know. I think, again, he's the type of guy that, boy, you always think until they rip that whistle off him. When you listen to him, especially this time of year, Scott, and you at a lot of the press conferences as well, he loves to talk basketball, even yesterday, and he loves this team. He really does. There are teams you kind of like and they're good or bad. There are teams you love, maybe even they're not good or bad. I think he loved this team regardless. This just added to that. I think he's having a great fun with this team. Certainly it's been a very tough year for him. This has kind of energized him in that way. I don't know. I think until
if he talks,
as long as he can.
If he said, Coppola, Gray, come in, you've been covering the sport for years, give me your advice, what do you think I should do? What would you say to him?
I think he should coach as long as he wants to. He's done a great job. Now you can get into the stuff regarding the NCAA, and that may bring a different thing. That aside, I would think he would coach as long as he wanted to.
I think way too much is being made out of this. I think that had the question not been asked this week, what are your plans for the future? Are you set to come back? Are you all, I forget exactly how the question was put, but it was put in such a way where he says, well, I'm not even going to talk about that until we get through this. We've got at least one game, hopefully 2 games to play, and I don't even think it's an issue. I think he's back, and I don't think it's an issue.
And this is nothing new. He's said this before. He'll talk with the family and so on and so forth. So I agree with Scott. I think he was blown up a little bit out of proportion.
Yeah. But I do think, though, that he would have stepped aside 3 years ago or 4 years ago, whenever that was with George Mason, had he gotten there, I was convinced from talking to him that he was ready to step aside. He's 68.
Could depend on how he felt then, too.
Right, but it was also easy to say after the fact.
Right.
It was easy enough to say after the fact. If we had won the national championship, I would have retired. But that's easy to say when he knows that it's a moot point.
How about the case to make for it? He's 68 years old. You have a new president coming in who's saying she's going to be, cracking down a bit on the graduation rate, keeping an eye on that. You got the NCAA violation, serving the suspension, which he's doing in a begrudging fashion. You have a chance to leave the stage now with your Final Four and leave there on a high note. That's the case to make, to step aside gracefully.
Maybe it depends on whether you win or not, Steve. That third NCAA championship. Now it really puts you in rarefied air.
Right.
It's only one different, but now you're into the upper echelon, and maybe that's a deciding factor. If it were to be now and 3, what a way to go out. Of course, it's a possibility.
Well, now the case to stay is this. Now the case to stay is I've got 6 freshmen. I've got guys who stayed very loyal to me during a very tough time. You had freshmen who could have left the scene, saying, "Hey, it's too hot." So the case to stay is that I've got a young team. I maybe get this kid Drummond, this high school player, a chance to win either multiple championships if I go back-to-back, or to win one if I lose now, right, in about 15 seconds.
Well, I just keep going back to the fact that I think there are too many things on the plate for him to come back for. I don't think he wants to leave the perception, for instance, that he's running from the NCAA with that 3-game suspension hanging over his head. I think he wants to come back, go through everything that's on the table concerning those NCAA violations to show that he wasn't running away from it, he wasn't hiding from it, he was going to stand up and confront it. And, he's got 3 years left on his contract. I just really do think right now we're talking about something that just came up from other sources, too premature, and too much made of it.
All right, let's stay with the game then real quick, about 30 seconds. John Calipari, we know there's no love lost between these two coaches, and it's a legitimate thing. They don't like each other. How does that match up, and what do you expect in Saturday's game? And again, 5 seconds, kind of summarize what will happen.
2 great coaches who really know, particularly if this game stays close. This is going to be great to watch down the last 4 or 5 minutes if it stays a close game, because these are 2 guys that are masters at working the clock, working the players, working the officials right down the stretch. And a lot of times, both of these guys win a lot of their games in those last 4 or 5 minutes. And this is going to be a great game to watch.
The issue with Calipari, Calhoun, no secret here, feels that he hasn't done things in the most ethical of ways, which is sort of irony now with Calhoun facing the NCAA violations, but he has great disdain for how he's coached his basketball, or how he's recruited and run his programs.
Well, listen, he's a coach that's perfectly happy to take the one-and-done guy. Did it at Memphis. He's doing it now. And he has no problem with that. He does great. Now, a guy like Krzyzewski is not going to do that. Just different styles. I have great respect for I've known Coach Cal a long time as well from my days in Springfield. He's done a great job. No matter what you say about him, he's done a fabulous job. Obviously, Jim's a Hall of Famer. Both teams are different than they were when they met in the Maui Invitational. Both are better. I think that, to me, it's a pick-em. I think it's going to be a great game.
That's a good point that you make, that both teams are better, because a lot of people talked about Coach Cal in Kentucky and how he does recruit one-and-done players, so he's constantly working new people into the program. They weren't that good back in Maui. Well, UConn, Jim Calhoun, was working a lot of freshmen into the program as well.
The women, we have to hit them, of course. Going for their 8th, I think, national championship, 4 freshmen on their side. How do you summarize this situation? They're playing Notre Dame. They've beaten 3 times already. Pat Summitt is not in the mix again. Your thoughts on this chance again?
Well, I think this, like Jim, I think Gino's done a great job of coaching this team. And I think too many people often think that these guys just roll out the basketballs and are automatically good. In case in point, Sunday's game, they needed to get a little bit smaller,
They fell behind at halftime, right?
And whether it was Gino's idea or one of the assistants, which he said it was, you know what? Hey, he's good. He allows assistants to have their input. He went with it. They made the change. They went small. They were quicker. End of story.
And Lauren Dixon has just turned out to be not only a spark plug, but such a valuable player with the minutes that she puts in, literally filling in for every player, subbing for every player on the team. And I cannot believe that Gino was not named Coach of the Year by the WBCA. Well, I can believe it because they've pulled this stunt before. But to me, he turned in his best coaching job since 1995.
All right, the specter of UConn and Stanford awaits with that, right? They're wrapping this up. They're wrapping this up, guys. We have to have the whole show next time. We'll get 30 minutes for the next show.
Okay, we'll do it.
Enough. When we come back, folks, we'll talk to our relationship guru, Pastor T.C. Brantley, about the pitfalls of dating after divorce and what to watch out for. You are watching The Stan Simpson Show.